Hi, good morning, everyone. Today we'll be talking about cost sensitivity of Indonesian consumers towards e-motorbikes. This is part of my assignment for my class in STEMBA or in ITB, and it's a microeconomic perspective on practical barriers as well that exists within the e-motorbikes. I'll be calling it EM moving forward just for convenience. So let's dive right in. So in terms of context, Indonesia, with over 112 million motorcycles, and to put that in perspective, the population is just nearing 300 million people. So this one third of people usually have motorcycles. So represents a massive two-wheel market in Indonesia. So yet EM holds less than 1% market share despite national initiatives to promote electric vehicles. Why is this so? So one of the aspects I tried to take a look is actually the affordability gap. So here's a problem statement for us. So the upfront cost for EMs is around 15 to 25 million, significantly exceeds that of traditional internal combustion engine. People usually call this ICE, which is roughly 10 to 18 million. So this price difference creates a major barrier, with 80% of interested consumers citing cost as their primary concern. So the core issue is the significant affordability gap, particularly for low income consumers. So we have to understand that most consumers are middle to low, most actually low, and not only do they um, are concerned about the whole price tag, most of them, 60-70%, they're quite dependent on credit, right? So the upfront cost is important. And then the next one is price elasticity in action. So research indicates a price elasticity greater than 1.5 for EMs in Indonesia, meaning a small price change leads to a proportionally larger change in demand. Subsidies around 7 million has shown to increase the adoption intent by 30%. So this subsidy is from the government, right? So highlighting consumer responsiveness to price adjustment. So small price changes have a large impact on the consumer behavior. So we talk when we talk about that cost, so what happens is there's a total cost of ownership disconnect. So number one is the misunderstood savings. So while EMs offer significant TCO, total cost ownership savings, around 2 to 3 million per year from reduced fuel and maintenance, only 27% of buyers consider these long-term benefits. Cash-based buyers prioritize immediate expenses over future gains. So it's the idea of what I get is what I get right now. Most of the people in the lower income, it's not so straightforward when we talk about future savings, right? So the next one is the hidden cost as well. So consumers face additional hidden costs, including battery replacement, 4 to 8 million every 3 to 5 years, and potential lost income from charging downtime, especially for ride-hailing drivers. The limited public charging infrastructure, under 100 stations nationwide right now, right? So in the context of this is that most people do use the motorcycles to generate the revenue. Is a direct revenue generator. Most of them are ride-hailing drivers, food deliveries as well. So the idea that if I wanted to work overtime, the I can't because the vehicle has downtime. And for another perspective, there are occasions where a motorcycle is used 24 hours. So the first 12 hours is used by one driver, the second one is used by a second driver. So ICE, the conventional engine, accommodates this by having like an instant refuel time. And the next one is about policy, right? So there's a policy gap and then also behavioral barriers within the market as well. In terms of policy gap, so in 2023, the 7 million subsidy giving out requires a tax ID and is limited to approved vendors, creating accessibility issues. There's also a reference for people not exactly being the most compliant when it comes to taxes. So it also becomes a barrier. Education is a barrier as well for them to understand why they need to have a tax ID. Okay. Next one is 43% of low-income consumers are unaware of existing subsidies and reach its predominantly urban skewed, right? So There's a challenge in awareness as well in terms of having the policy existent. The next one is behavioral and psychological barriers. So, number one, 72% of potential buyers cite range anxiety, given the average EM range of 50 to 80 kilometers per charge. In terms of putting context into this, not many people, especially if you talk about lower income, lower education, can imagine what 50 to 80 kilometers is like, right? So they're unable to assess in a comprehensive way. The second point is negative perception persists from early low quality EM models. So there were early models that came from multiple companies, I would say, some from China that tried to inject the more affordable ones, but because it wasn't exactly highly regulated, it didn't meet some safety standards when it comes to what do you call that? Standard vehicles for transportation. Okay, and the last one is lack of social proof due to low visibility of EMs in daily use hinders widespread acceptance. I think one of the easiest way when we talk about social proof is that the fact that most EMs have not gone through the whole product life cycle. So motorcycles usually last 8 to 10 years. Meanwhile, the market for EMs have only boomed since I think COVID, which is like 2021, 2022, right? And then we have consumer preference and infrastructure innovation as well. When you talk about consumer preference, it's in which people actually do have a preference that's not yet completely fulfilled. So 63% prefer dual battery EMs for extended range. Consumer prioritize functionality parity with ICE motorcycles, requiring similar cargo capacity and wet weather handling for multi-purpose travel needs, right? So in this part, people prefer dual battery, which is the one where you have two packs. One will be the source of the energy. The other one is charged on the way, or it could also work in the swapping battery scene as well. And then the second item I want to talk about here is the fact that people are used to having a specific idea of what a motorcycle is, right? So they require similar cargo capacity, and then they hope that it doesn't break when it gets wet, right? So these are some of the things that EMs have to catch up in terms of trying to fulfill the definition of a motorcycle. Right? So number two is infrastructure and battery innovation. So dual battery models can extend the range up to 150 kilometers twice, as we've mentioned from the previous one. Battery swapping technology reduces charging time from 4 to 6 hours to 5 minutes, though only three active swap providers exist nationally of 2023. So I'll take an example. The one that built like this is the Honda motorcycle, the EMs from Honda, right? So what they needed to build was a battery swapping station. And it is true that from 4 to 6 hours when you usually charge, it feels like 5 minutes because what you do is you pull out your old one and you put in the new one from the station, and then you plug in the one with in low battery to the station. So it's just swapping it out. Okay. So with all of these challenges, we talk about alternatives, right, to the ownership one. Number one, you call about innovating finance models. Number one is battery leasing. So the battery is a separate ownership. So you own two things. You own a motorcycle and then you own a battery. And the battery has its own model, right? So you this is the part where it comes into why the swapping model also works because right it's a separate product, and also in the idea in the minds of the people that buy this, they understand that okay, I bought this motorcycle with what kind of return, I bought this battery with what kind of return, versus compiling all of the issues into one product. Number two is flexible financing. So flexible financing, it's rent to own and microloan programs from fintech companies. This is basically trying to provide a much more flexible model in terms of owning the motorcycle as well. This has been implemented in terms of rent to own in some of the more ride-hailing scenarios, where they rent it and then after a specific period, usually 4 to 5 years, the vehicle becomes theirs, right? Then there's also fleet pilots, right? So this is the ones where we try to introduce the product to the market by actually working with the ride-hailing giants like Gojek and Grab, right? So that I think right now for cars as well, they're already doing it as well. For cars, they're doing it with BYD. And so this is something that's definitely possible if you want to scale it up when it comes to EMs. So Uh, the last one is my analysis on what key policy recommendations we can try to develop for the government as well. Number one is to simplify the subsidy access. So it could be that it is something that we implement as a QR code wallet integration for easy digital access for the subsidies. um, Credit card adoption is not high, banking adoption is not high. 90% of financing all happens still with the non-banking services. So having some, and but people use QR codes, right? So in Indonesia we use something called the CRIS, the QRIS, and this is mostly something that is very much accessible to many because they already use the ride-hailing application that are connected to each digital wallet, which has the QR code capability, right? So next one is the boost battery swap infrastructure. So provide OPEX grants to incentivize the expansion of battery swap stations, addressing range anxiety and charging downtime concerns. This is also something we can open up for the public as well. People can own these stations to generate revenue for themselves as well. And number three is mandate dual battery standardization. I think this is one of the bigger challenges when it comes to uniting the motorcycle producers, right? So if you talk about Honda, Yamaha, and also you talk about the ones that have tried to introduce their own brands these days, they've all had their own R&D, right? And it's business-wise, psychological-wise, you want to be the winner, right? You want your result, the one you developed, to be the one that is scaled up to the market. But then, we do require at some point for the market to settle down and then standardize dual battery configurations to ensure sufficient range for daily use. And it has to, again, match ICE performance because that's the definition of a motorcycle these days. It's no longer just two wheels and then can carry you from one point to one point. It's the expectation you get in terms of performance, whether it's actual travel performance or convenient performance. Right. So number four is extend the microcredit to unbanked. Right. So it's also about trying to work with the non-banking microfinancing companies to talk about the financing of the motorcycles. And then the fifth one is the community test drive. So organize local community test rides to actually introduce this to the market. In Indonesia, word of mouth is quite powerful when it comes to these kind of things because people live in a more community style, right? People live in a more tribal style where you're very still connected to your family, especially if you talk about outside of the bigger cities, the tier two, tier three cities, they're pretty much still community based. So community test rides would help in the sense. Okay, so strategic insight for the accelerated adoption, right? So number one, you have to reframe the value. So position EMs not just as a transportation, but as productivity tools essential for daily income generation, especially for gig economy workers. So we've all agreed, and I mentioned this previously, that the motorcycles, the EMs, have proven to have a lower cost in terms of operational costs throughout the year. Right? So if people can understand this and if we can close the gap on the downtime with the battery swapping, we can totally reframe the value for what EM stands for. Then job creation and reliability. So highlight the link between EM ownership and enhanced job opportunities, emphasizing on reliability and reduce operational costs per consistent earning. Same as the reframing of the value. The output is the same. So risk-based affordability as well. So address affordability through the lens of risk reduction, through battery leasing, flexible payment, rather than just an initial purchase price. So it makes sense that you pay higher if you buy two things versus you buy one thing. And in conclusion, I'd like to call this paving the way for inclusive mobility. While EMs face significant adoption inertia due to cost sensitivity, a multifaceted approach can overcome these barriers. Three of it. Number one is overcoming inertia. The path to widespread EM adoption hinges on understanding and addressing consumer cost sensitivity with practical solutions. So, what I call about the inertia here, the force here, is the fact that we have a current definition, right? And we're trying to fit ourselves into that definition as well. So you have to overcome that inertia gap and then fill in what is needed within the market. And then the next one is ecosystem solution, right? Combining policy support, infrastructure, and innovative ownership model is crucial, right? So we talked about when you talk about the infrastructure, it's not only that you have to decide on the standardized product because infrastructure and investments. If the products are inconsistent, it's really difficult to scale up infrastructure because you need. It's easier to scale it up if you can get a public funding versus everything's privately owned and privately developed. And honestly, in Indonesia, it's not like we can outsource it right now to the government because transportation is not the only problem we face right now. So the last one is an inclusive approach. So true inclusive mobility requires deep understanding and responding to the unique needs of bottom tier users, so making EMs accessible for all. This is the part where competitors from outside of Indonesia need to understand. It's quite a unique market. It's quite a unique utility. I'll take, for example, some motorcycles um, face difficulties adoption in the market because they say it's rust a lot, right? It's not actually because it's specifically the motorcycle rust a lot. It's the fact that Indonesian would actually use the motorcycle near the beach where there's no exact pavement or actually roads to use the motorcycle on, right? So there's a gap of education that needs to be understood when you try to introduce the product to the Indonesian market. And this concludes the presentation. In short, EMs are one way to actually move forward when it comes to renewable, maintaining sustainable energy as well. But having a product targeted for the lower uh, education, lower educated market, and then the lower income market proves quite challenging when it comes to having a product that's quote unquote a bit more advanced and complicated. So we have to take it very holistically. We have to have a holistic approach on this one in terms of understanding infrastructure and policy as well, and the product as well, right? And then honestly, we do have to work with the competitors as well because we can't have too many products out there. It'll it'll hold back the infrastructure scale up process. Okay. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Hope to see you next time.